And what we're going to look at is Chapter 25. It's the breakdown of the Yalta system. So this is the beginning of the Cold War. The Cold War is going to start in 1945, and it doesn't end until the Soviet Union collapses in the late 1980s. And we're going to kind of just do a brief overview of this one, and then in Chapter 26 we kind of get into a little bit more detail. But there's a lot in the Cold War that you need to know, just for the simple fact that the Cold War kind of sets us up for modern day issues. It's the same thing with imperialism. A lot of stuff that happened in imperialism, we're still dealing with it currently today in our society. So at Yalta, remember, the big three meet, and the big three of World War II would be Britain, led by Churchill, the United States, led by FDR, and the Soviet Union being led by Stalin. So when these big three meet, they're meeting to kind of set up the world for after the war. And so what they've all agreed is that the United Nations will replace the old League of Nations. Now, we've kind of done this already before. I mean, Churchill and FDR, they met at the Atlantic Charter in Newfoundland in August 1941, before the United States is technically in World War II. They're already meeting and talking about a worldwide view of how things should look after World War II is over. Now, at Yalta, Stalin promises that he is going to go ahead and allow free elections in all the eastern territories that he has gone through to get to Germany. So here's the map, okay? So remember, in the actual World War II, what America first does is we'll go into the African area. We'll go into Africa with Operation Torch. Once we clear out the Nazis here in Africa, because Hitler kind of wants the Suez Canal right here. It's oil transportation area. He would like it, so he sent his guy Rommel here. And so eventually General Montgomery, British General Montgomery, will get that guy out of here. And then we'll go up through Sicily and go up through Italy to defeat Mussolini. You know, remember, Mussolini's army, the Italian army, is kind of weak, and so the Nazi or the German army is really having to support it most of the time. We'll eventually open up the second front here in Europe, and that's when we land at Normandy, and that's that massive Allied invasion. So it's not just American soldiers, but it's all the Allies, with the exception of the Soviet Union, that will land here June 6, 1944, D-Day. So we'll liberate France very shortly. By August 25th, 1944, France, Paris, is liberated. And it's no longer Vichy France, no longer Nazi France. It's going to now be Free France. Now, the Soviet Union, with Stalin, he's been pressing in here from the Eastern Front. But wherever his Soviet Red Army goes, you know, Stalin feels like this is a treat, a reward for what he's done. Remember, at the Battle of Stalingrad, he's lost 1 million soldiers. Kind of just, they died because, remember, the Germans don't believe in taking the Soviets as prisoners of war. And so Hitler believes, you know, just kill them. And so that's kind of what they do. And the battle is so fierce that the whole city of Stalingrad really doesn't exist after the battle. But remember, Stalin also tells his soldiers, you either are victorious at Stalingrad or you die. So, you know, it's kind of like that old Spartan theory on winning or dying. I believe in fight and live another day, but they have a different mentality. So the Soviet Union, they've been pushing in here from the east, and we've been pushing in here from the west. This is kind of going to set us up for this whole Cold War stuff, because Stalin is never going to retreat from these areas. Why would he? In his opinion, these are his rewards for losing all those soldiers fighting in World War II. Also, remember back in World War I, the Russians, when they had that Bolshevik Russian Revolution, Lenin signs a treaty giving Germany a lot of this territory right after World War I. And he felt that all these territories would eventually overthrow Germany and become a satellite state, or become a communist state again. So he thought he was going to get them back all the way anyway. And remember, the Soviet Union formerly Russia, is very upset that they lost all this territory. So Stalin just kind of sees this as an opportunity to regain the glory of the Soviet Union and also to make nice buffer states. These satellite states is what's going to form right after World War II is over, and these are going to be buffer zones. So next time someone wants to invade the Soviet Union here, they got to go through all this territory right here before they even get to the Soviet Union. So you kill all these people, and even if you started, you know, early, like let's say April, by the time you get in here, the Russian winter is going to be setting in, and just like Hitler found out, you can't really move your tanks when the gasoline in the thing is freezing up. So you're going to have some issues. So this is why Stalin isn't going to want to retreat. But it's also going to give him some alliances and some support. Really, at this moment in time, it's the Soviet Union who is a communist nation. I mean, you got other communist people out there. You have Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, you have Mao Zedong in China, but they're not in full control of their countries. And so, really, the Soviet Union is kind of the only big communist nation. Fidel Castro hasn't led his revolution yet in Cuba. I mean, it's coming. So some support would be nice for the Soviet Union. Now, in the West, because this is where the Allies, who are really the British and the Americans, are going through their democracies, and these places all have a history of democracy in this area, they're going to fall to democracy. So we're going to move on to the next one. So this is just what Europe kind of looks like during the war, and just kind of explaining why Yalta and this breakdown is going to occur. So the Soviets are going to dominate Eastern Europe because that's where the Red Army marches in. So by 1947, the communist governments had become very entrenched in East Germany, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, and Hungary. So Czechoslovakia is later going to be taken over in 1947. Remember, FDR dies right before World War II is over. He dies down there in Warm Springs, Georgia, and so he has a hemorrhage, and when he dies, Stalin was kind of being a good boy because FDR was there. But now when FDR is gone, he doesn't need to be a good boy anymore because he kind of feels that FDR is the tougher of the guys. So the new president of the United States is Harry S. Truman. Now Harry S. Truman is a tough old guy too. I mean, he fought in World War I. He's a very, it's going to be this way or no way. He's kind of like the buck stops here. That's his famous quote. He's a good guy, but he does not like Stalin. And Stalin doesn't like him either. So there's no love lost here. But this is going to start causing some issues, some problems between the United States and the Soviet Union. Is that these two guys just don't trust each other and don't like each other. Now, when you look at these countries that are going to communist governments, they are going to communist governments, the Soviet army's there. Some people are going to resist the communist takeover, and one of those is going to be Yugoslavia. So Yugoslavia is going to be the exception to Soviet dominant in the Eastern European area. Tito is going to be a communist party leader. Like, he's actually going to fight the Nazis in Yugoslavia when the German army gets in there. So they're working against the Nazis. So they've already kind of got this sentiment of resistance. When the Soviet Union is putting its pressure on dominating them, Tito, it kind of just goes against this. He refuses to accept the Soviet form of a communist nation. And the West, the United States, is going to actually like Tito. Even though he's a communist, the West is going to like him for the simple fact that he tells Stalin, screw you, I'm not going to go along with what you say. So the West is going to support Yugoslavia. Even though it's communist, we're going to support it for the simple fact that they are telling Stalin they are not going along with him. What Yugoslavia is going to do is that they are going to create a communist government in practice, but it's more it's a little less decentralized than what you would see in the Soviet Union. Yugoslavia is not going to be a hardliner on communism like the Soviet Union is, so it's going to be a little bit easier for the people there. Now, Stalin doesn't like Tito. He believes that at any moment he'll be able to crush Tito, but Tito's got the Western support, so the Soviet Union's not going to move against Tito because he's got the backing, really, of the United States and other Western powers. It's probable that Stalin was looking for communist revolutions in Western Europe. Remember, the whole thing about Lenin and Stalin is they kind of are thinking that there's going to be worldwide revolutions of communism throughout. The only issue is that communism really kind of takes place in desolate areas, areas where you have a huge population that is extremely poor. Unemployment is really high. Everything bad you could possibly think, that's normally where communism will take place. It's in areas that are kind of hopeless. Their government's not responding to the needs of the people. That's when that's where communism will take place at. So in Western Europe, that's not necessarily going to be the case, because Western Europe is going to appeal to Western powers for help. So they'll appeal to the United States for help. But Stalin is hoping that revolutions will occur in Western Europe, and he's really waiting for them to the middle class to overthrow the ruling elites, and then they go ahead and have like a big workers overthrow. So the middle class will overthrow them, and then the workers will eventually take control of the country. This is what he thinks is going to happen. So because we know that this is what Stalin is thinking, we're going to try and stop it before it occurs. Now, Winston Churchill, as soon as World War II is over, is going to get voted out as Prime Minister. He's no longer going to be the Prime Minister of England. Instead, he is going to start making speech tours, because this is what you do when you're done with your political career. So Winston Churchill comes here to America, and he's giving a speech in Missouri, and he tells the graduating class, an iron curtain has descended upon Europe. What Winston Churchill is referring to is the dividing line between democracies and communist nations in Europe. So Eastern Europe is going to be considered communist, and Western Europe will be considered democracy. And that's what he's talking about with Iron Curtain. There's not a real wall. It's not that. It's not a real curtain. He's just saying that there's a political ideology that's different between Eastern and Western Europe. Western Europe tends to favor democracies and capitalism, and then Eastern Europe tends to be falling to the communist overthrow, or the communist revolutions that are occurring. When he says this, what he's really getting into the American psyche and everybody's psyche is that we should be very careful of Stalin and his motives, because people really are starting to see Stalin as kind of a shady cat. But remember, in World War II, America builds the Manhattan Project. We build the atomic bomb. We don't share that secret with Stalin. He's got his spies in the United States, and he's got his spies everywhere getting information. So that's how the Soviet Union will get the atomic bomb. So that's one of those things where, after World War II is over, we can't be friends anymore because we don't have a common enemy. The common enemy was Germany. Once we defeat Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany, the enemy factor is gone, and so you turn on yourselves. That's how all alliances work. You're friends for a while as long as you have a common enemy, and then as soon as you defeat your common enemy, you're going to start seeing tensions and divisions. The Soviet Union kind of wants to lead the world. The United States is kind of thinking that democracy should lead the world, with the United States kind of helping out. America will not go back to an isolationist policy. Instead, we're going to go to very much an involvement foreign policy, a policy about containing communism. So when Winston Churchill makes the statement, he's basically just telling the American people, yeah, everything you suspect about Stalin is absolutely true. I mean, it doesn't help when Stalin actually will detonate an atomic bomb. So we had the atomic bomb, we dropped it twice on Japan, and then Stalin very shortly afterward has the atomic bomb. So it kind of tells Americans he is spying on us, and now he has the same power as we have. And Oppenheimer's the guy who says, I have death. Death is, I'm the master of death. So now Stalin is also the master of death. So it really freaks people out. So Truman's our president at the moment, and Truman is going to take a very firm stand against communism, and he's going to issue the Truman Doctrine in 1947. Greece is being threatened with a communist takeover, and when they're being threatened with a communist takeover, what this means is that there is a communist party that is trying to overthrow the government. And it's not just Greece. Turkey is also being threatened with a communist takeover. So what Truman decides to do is he issues the Truman Doctrine. The Truman Doctrine states that the United States is going to help any nation that is threatened by communism. The United States will give you money. We will give you aid if you do not want to be taken over by communism. This is very much a containment policy. We're trying to stop communism from spreading. It is also an involvement foreign policy. America is shifting focus. No longer will we sit back and watch things happen. We are going to start to help. We're going to start being involved. So we're going to go to part 2 of the Cold War.